Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you joining us today. We are delighted to have you here for this very special webinar hosted by the World Rowing and WWF Healthy Waters Alliance. And today, we are focusing on one of the most pressing ecological challenges in our region, the declining health of the Baltic Sea and freshwater ecosystems in Latvia and in Lithuania. This session brings together science, advocacy, and real-world solutions to address the complex threats facing our rivers, our lakes, and our coastal waters, from pollution to biodiversity loss and habitat degradation. And I'm very happy and honored to be joined by two special guests and expert speakers. Firstly, Magda Jentgena from WWF Latvia, Baltic Sea and Freshwater Program Manager. She will provide a clear science-based overview of the current state of our waters and the root causes behind their decline. Welcome, Magda. Then we will hear from Morgana Daniele. Welcome, Morgana. She's an advocacy and communication specialist from the Lithuanian NGO, the Foundation for Peatlands Restoration and Conservation. Morgana will highlight local innovative restoration efforts, including wetland recovery and sustainable land use practices that are making a real impact. So this is not just a conversation about problems, it's about solutions, collaboration, and hope for healthier waters. We hope that you can enjoy this session, and we invite you to submit your questions on the Q&A option on the call, or add them to the chat during the presentation. And at the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions and answers and open the floor to discuss these topics. So I'm really very happy to ask Magda to start her presentation, and obviously thank both speakers for attending today.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here and to be able to speak to your platform and show you a little bit more about what we are dealing with here in Latvia, and Morgana will give more of an overview of Lithuania. But yes, I am Magda. I work for Pasaules Dabas Fonds. We're an associate partner of WWF in Latvia, and I am the Baltic Sea and Freshwater Program Manager here. Today we're going to look at what is happening in Latvia, both in the Baltic Sea and in our freshwater, because those two are incredibly interconnected in our case. And I just wanted to say that I think the sports auditory is very, very important. And I myself am not a biologist. I did not get into this field of work from the very beginning. I got into it through my passion for scuba diving. So also through being on the water. And I think the people who are doing this daily, like the rowing, like the rowers are the ones who see the problems and who have very big potential also to interact with it and potentially be part of the solution as well. So I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to address these issues. So I just wanted to start very quickly with who we are as an organization. I'm very happy for the World Rowing partnership that you have with WWF, because we are very present, just like you, like your association. We're present across the entire world. We have representation in more than 100 countries around the world on 5 continents. And our mission is very clear. We are working to stop the degradation of planet's natural environments and build a future where humans live in harmony with nature, because only through this harmony can we hope to achieve some sort of stability in the future in terms of climate and biodiversity crises and our well-being as well. But more specifically in Latvia, we are working with 5 different programs. We work with forestry. That's very important for us, of course. But then we have the Baltic Sea and Freshwater program, as well as food, climate, and biodiversity. And we're doing something in all of those fields. But today we will focus, of course, on the Baltic Sea and Freshwater program. So the reason that it is impossible to separate freshwater and the marine programs in Latvia is because of the very unique situation that the Baltic Sea is in. As you can see in the map, the Baltic Sea is very enclosed. I sometimes like to compare it to a very large lake. It is mostly surrounded by land. It has a very, very big catchment. The catchment area is highlighted in this map in the brighter green colors. And as you can see, the entire country of Latvia is in the catchment. All of Lithuania is in the catchment. And what that means essentially is that anything we do on land within this territory impacts what happens in the sea. So we can live very far away from the sea and we actually have an impact on it because of the freshwater network. So all the rivers are flowing into the sea essentially and creating the problems or helping to be the solutions of what happens in the Baltic Sea. It is also a very unique place because it is the youngest sea in the world. It was formed only about 10 to 15,000 years ago when the glaciers, which were above our territory, started melting and formed the sea. And because also of the large freshwater inflow into the sea and because of the snow and ice during the winter seasons, it is also the largest brackish body of water in the world. It is the brackish sea means that its salinity is lower than other seas. So, for example, if on average the ocean is about 30 promils in salinity, then the Baltic Sea ranges between almost zero, close to the northern parts of the sea, close to Finland and Sweden, but up to 12 to 14 promils down next to Denmark, where the Baltic Sea meets the North Sea. So it is a very unique, what that means is basically that it's a very unique environment, and all the species that live in the Baltic Sea are specifically, they are equipped only to live here. So if there is impacts from climate change, if we're talking about salinity changing or the water getting warmer, these species have nowhere else to go because they're adapted to this environment. The other reason why our sea is so special, unique, and sometimes difficult is because of the very slow water exchange that happens. Like I said, because it is mostly surrounded by land and because the water exchange only happens every 30 to 50 years, it means that anything that goes into the sea stays there for a very long time. So if we're talking about any sort of pollution, anything like that is going to be there for a long time. As you can see also on the map, on the left side in next to Denmark and Sweden, that is the only place that the sea is connected to the North Sea, and that is the only place where this water exchange happens. And during storms, for example, we can get more sort of, so to say, fresh water coming in, or this sort of oxygen-rich water coming in from the North Sea, which helps sort of bring fresh life into our Baltic Sea. Also, I mentioned the depth here, which is 53, the average depth is 53 meters of the Baltic Sea. And that's also worth mentioning because that is not very deep at all. So if we look, for example, at the Mediterranean Sea, there the average depth is 1,500 meters. So what that means is basically that, again, the Baltic Sea is much more vulnerable to different changes in temperature and salinity because of this shallowness of the sea. And that is important for specific species, for example, like the fish species that I had on the very cover of the presentation, our cod, which basically has very important nesting grounds in these deeper areas in the Baltic Sea, which we only have 3 of. And it means that once these areas are impacted, then the fish species like cod have a very difficult time surviving. Additionally, it is an incredibly intensively used sea in the world. We have very active shipping industry. We have, at any given time, there's about 2,000 ships on the Baltic Sea, which of course means that we have quite a higher risk for oil spills. And in fact, there is about one serious oil spill per year in the Baltic Sea. And with the current geopolitical situation, and the Russian shadow fleet, which is shipping across the Baltic Sea, in bad physical state, the risk is higher. So that's another vulnerability that our sea faces. And here we can sort of see the results of the pollution. Perhaps you have heard this, that the Baltic Sea sometimes is called the most polluted sea in the world, which is very shocking. Not just to people, but even to our people in Latvia. People are very shocked when they hear that this is the most polluted sea in the world, because very often they imagine that this is due to plastic waste or that sort of pollution. But we are talking about chemical pollution when we say this. And that is something called eutrophication, which means that basically there is too much phosphorus and nitrogen into the sea. And that causes algae blooms. So if we look at the Baltic Sea on the map, on the left side, all the red areas, so 97% of the sea have or are affected by eutrophication, and only the green areas are in good status. And that has led to almost 1/3 of the sea being dead. So that means when there's too much algae, light cannot get through the surface of the water. And of course, we know from basic biology, if there is no light, then there is no life essentially in the sea. And once this algae starts rotting, it further depletes the oxygen levels in the water, and nothing else except some bacteria can live there. And you can also see what it looks like under the water. If we often see with scuba diving, we see crystal clear waters in the Caribbean or somewhere else, then in the Baltic Sea, it is very dark, it is very cold, and the visibility is very often very bad. And the other picture that you can see here is what eutrophication looks like from space. So this is a photograph taken from NASA. You can see the island of Gotland over here, and it is this area here on the map. And all the green swirls in the water are the algae that are blooming during the summer. This is actually right now the most active period. The algae blooms during the hottest time of the year, usually July and August. It is also toxic to people. So we see a lot of beaches being closed down, especially, for example, you can see near Poland, the territory which is most impacted by eutrophication. Very often during summer, beaches get closed down due to the toxic algae that is blooming and killing the sea. So here is the chart, which is sort of the cause of the Baltic Sea being called the most polluted sea in the world. Of course, it does not apply to the entire sea. And again, we're talking only about pressures from eutrophication, and that is the South Baltic Sea. In that sense, that territory, yes, it's the worst in the world compared to others. But if we look at other pressures, so hazardous substances or overfishing, different parts of the Baltic Sea are ranked in the middle or lower. So where is the problem, and where does eutrophication come from as such? Well, the largest part of it comes from agriculture, unfortunately. So like I said, it's the two chemical compounds, it's nitrogen and phosphorus, which are causing this algae to bloom. Essentially, we are using them, it's fertilizer that we're using in agriculture. It helps plants grow on land, and it does the exact same thing in water. And because our entire country is within the catchment of the Baltic Sea, that means that all of these extra fertilizers or phosphorus and nitrogen, which is not absorbed by the plants on land. It goes into ditches, it goes into rivers, into streams, and it ends up in the sea. And this is something that a lot of people are noticing as well. Our rivers are overgrowing with reeds and other grasses, and they are becoming more and more swamp-like, essentially. And that is because of eutrophication. So while a lot of it does come from agriculture, some of phosphorus also comes less so now from cleaning products, because there is EU regulation which has significantly decreased the amount of phosphorus that's allowed to be in cleaning products. And then some of the nitrogen, of course, comes also from factories, from production, by burning things, it goes into the atmosphere. And of course, we also know that the atmosphere contains quite a lot of nitrogen. So there is also a natural process through which nitrogen from air does dissolve in water, and also adds nitrogen to water, which sort of worsens eutrophication. It used to be much worse because a lot of these phosphorus and nitrogen used to also go into our waterways from wastewater treatment plants, and this was very noticeable in the ex-Soviet Union countries. So again, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Estonia, because after the Soviet Union fell apart, we sort of started this monitoring, and we did not have wastewater treatment plants during the Soviet Union. But after that, the EU did invest quite a bit of money into this region to update our wastewater treatment systems. And that has been significantly reduced, although it is still impacting our water systems. It is not all doom and gloom. So we do have some beautiful areas of the Baltic Sea, and I did want to show you that as well. So in the map where I was showing you the impacts of eutrophication, there were some green areas on the map where the water quality was good, and this is what it looks like in those territories. So the Baltic Sea is actually incredibly beautiful. It has a lot of these specifically bladder wrack territories. It has beautiful seagrass meadows, and there definitely are territories which are thriving. And this is sort of the example what we need to work towards. This is what we could achieve in more areas of the Baltic Sea if we improve the quality. And now I want to look a little bit more into freshwater and what is happening there and why it's leading to the state of the Baltic Sea that the sea is in. So, I mean, if we think of freshwater, I feel like, especially in Latvia, we often think that we have a lot of freshwater. But if we look at the global context, then 97% of all water on Earth is saltwater, so that's seas and oceans. Then about 2% are the frozen poles, North and South Pole that we have. And then only about 1% of water on the Earth is available for humans. And we need water for everything. We need it massively for agriculture. We don't just need it to drink or shower or do our laundry. We need it for every sort of production, anything we want to do. It is all about fresh water. And also considering just how little fresh water is available to us on Earth, it is sort of incredible that about 1 in 10 known species live in freshwater, and about half of all fish species live in freshwater. Again, considering that 97% of water on all Earth is saltwater. So then we can look at what is happening to the wildlife in these ecosystems, marine and freshwater. The decline globally has been massive over the past 50 years in all habitats. I mean, 56% decrease of marine populations is a huge amount. But then when you look at freshwater, that's where the biggest decline has happened in the past 50 years. So the average is 85% decline of all freshwater species populations. And that is, it's a very dramatic decline. And then also the rate of extinctions. The highest is for amphibians, again, related to freshwater ecosystems. And the decline of those ecosystems is one of the root causes for these extinctions. So we're not even talking about the decline of populations, but actual extinctions of populations. And here we can see the drivers of that. So for most of these species groups, the biggest driver is the habitat loss and degradation. And this is direct human impact. We are changing our waterways, and this is very true for most of Europe. There's very few parts of Europe where we have left our freshwater ecosystems be and we have not degraded them. Most of our rivers and waterways are straightened, they are dredged, they are polluted. We have sort of not taken care of them at all. And here we can see the result of that happening. And then we can look more specifically at Latvia as what is happening with our river network. This is a map highlighting 4 of our catchment areas in Latvia. So even though it's all within the Baltic Sea catchment, we have 4 bigger river basins that are highlighted in light and dark gray on this map. And then most of our water quality in Latvia is just moderate. And here I want to specify that we're not talking about the water that's coming out of the tap. That water is fine. So if any of you are coming for the rowing championship in Lithuania, the tap water is good in almost all places. Here we are talking about the surface water body quality. So we're talking about specifically rivers and lakes. And only about, at the moment, 35% of our water bodies are in good and high status. And that is very far from the targets which we are trying to achieve, and it is below the EU target, EU current status. So in Europe, about 40% of water bodies are in good status. So with our 35%, we are below the EU average. And the target for the entire EU is to achieve 100% good water body status by 2027. So that's 1.5 years away. And that is something that unfortunately is not going to be achieved if we are looking at the state we are in right now. But the good news is that a lot of, for example, in Latvia, water bodies which are yellow in this map or moderate, they're quite easy things to change to achieve good status. So there is a possibility to get better. And the other good news, looking at this map, if you look at, for example, here, this middle section, which is the dark gray river catchment of Lielupe, which is also a shared catchment between Latvia and Lithuania, as the river starts in Lithuania and then it flows through Latvia into the Baltic Sea. That used to be 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it used to be all orange and red. And that has improved now to moderate. And this area is also the one in Latvia which has the highest activity of intensive agriculture. And it is very visible by the water quality that agriculture has this impact on the water bodies there more than in other territories. Whereas, for example, if we look at the other catchment, Gauja, which is in the northern part of Latvia, overall, it has the best water quality, and that is because this river starts and ends in Latvia. It does go into into Estonia a little bit, but most of the water bodies are in Latvia, so we don't have transboundary pollution like we do in the other 3 catchments in Latvia. So I've been talking a lot about the status, but not perhaps that much about the impact. If one of the causes is agricultural runoff, this pollution that I mentioned, then another cause is hydromorphological changes. So essentially anything that we as humans do to rivers to physically change them. One thing that we have done quite a bit is straighten rivers and dredge them. So because it's not very convenient for us when a river is curved and loopy, and it is much simpler for us as humans to deal with the river if it's just straight. So that's what we have done a lot in Europe. And the other thing that we have done quite a bit is block rivers. So you can see on the global map, most of the places where we have more human activity, which is easier reached by people. So North America, Europe, um, China, for example, we have a lot of dams on those rivers, a huge amount. Obviously, in the past, we have used hydropower, as that would be the only way to produce energy, to run mills in the past. And we have dammed those rivers. Unfortunately, now those dams are still there, even though the dam removal movement has started in the US. It started already in the 80s, and it has started in Europe for the past couple of decades. So that's a very good thing. But unfortunately, most of the major rivers across the world are still not free flowing. And that is impacting the water quality. It impacts the sedimentation of rivers, the movement of sedimentation. It obviously impacts the life cycle of migratory fish species. So, like I said, the sharpest decline in wildlife populations was in freshwater. And if we look at migrating fish in Europe, it's even steeper. And that is because a lot of fish, for example, like salmon, they live in the sea, but then they need to go into the rivers to spawn. But because there are dams in front of them, they are not able to pass those dams, so they cannot spawn, and we cannot repopulate essentially these species which are dying out. It is sort of like these small rivers which they need to get to are like kindergartens for the fish. And if we're closing these kindergartens, then the small fish have nowhere to grow up, nowhere to go. And that is why we have these sharp declines in populations. But then we look at some positive examples. So this is a project that we carried out in Latvia. Because like I said, even though if a lot of our water bodies are of moderate status, there are some things we can do which immediately improve the state of water. This was the first dam removal that happened in Latvia, and we started working on it 4 years ago, but it was only completed last year. We thought that this would be quick and easy because we assumed that this was a dam that nobody needed. There's not really people living around it. It's quite far away, and it's not the most significant water reservoir that was behind this dam. It wasn't really used for much. But we were met with a lot of local resistance because people are unaware of the need for free-flowing rivers. People assume that they can dam rivers and that it is their rights and it doesn't impact the river. But of course it does. And carrying out projects like this is incredibly rewarding at the end because you see how quickly the river can recover, and you can see a drone photo of the river taking back its shape, and this was taken just days after the dam was removed. So you can see all the floodplains which were covered with water before, but the most amazing thing is that the entire time the river had been going in its riverbed, even though the river had been dammed. And it immediately took back its course when the dam was removed. And here you on the right side, you can see the photo of what the river looked like after the dam was removed. So we restored rapids. And the most amazing thing was the first year that we removed this, trout were already migrating up the river to spawn, because above the dam there was about 20 kilometers of the river, which is very suitable for trout spawning. So this has been an amazing project for local trout migration. And then another way we are working on reducing the impacts of pollution on waterways is we are trying to work in a catchment approach at the moment through a project called Baltic. And this project we're doing in Latvia, Estonia, and Sweden. And we are looking at ways to solve diffuse pollution. So everything that causes eutrophication, like I told you before, through agriculture, for example, we are trying to reduce this impact by building constructed wetlands, which are acting. I mean, they don't look as impressive as dam removal in person. They look like ponds in nature, but essentially they serve as places for the fertilizer to filter through, so clean water can go into rivers and streams afterwards. And if done right, they can also serve as amazing places for biodiversity. So they can improve bird species, populations. They can also act as flood mitigation measures, especially, which is very important during these periods. Even this summer in our region, agricultural sector is suffering quite a lot due to heavy rains. And these natural measures can help both purify water, they can help against floods, and they can improve biodiversity. So they are sort of a win-win um, for a lot of different issues. These are just a couple of examples of what we are doing as an organization, which is very hands-on projects. Of course, we also have a lot of policy work, which we work with policymakers. We try to improve legislation. We try to better integrate EU regulations. We try to educate the society. But if we're talking about some practical things, then these are a couple of examples of things we do, which have very direct results immediately. And then the final thing I wanted to look at today is sort of our role as people, as inhabitants, as consumers. And I think this map is quite strong in terms of it showing the impact that we have in carbon footprint around the world. And the darker the color, the bigger the ecological footprint. And which was interesting to me was the fact that Western Europe, which we often consider to have a higher standard of living, actually has a smaller ecological footprint than, for example, us in the Baltic countries and Scandinavia. And one of my guesses is that people have reached a higher level of well-being in those countries and are able to pay more attention to their footprints. They are looking at more organic produce. They are looking at more recycling, reusing, and buying better quality products than, for example, the Baltic countries, where we are still trying to push for higher consumption. Then, of course, North America also stands out on this map as their consumption is quite large. And today I did talk a lot about agriculture, but I do think that this is one of the big areas where we can have an impact because food is something that we all consume. And if we are aware of how big the impacts of agriculture are, not just on water, but also on climate and on soil health and so many other things, that's why I wanted to highlight this. So we often think about emissions coming from transport sector, and they do come a lot from the transport sector, but they also come from the food sector. So almost 1/3 of global emissions are related to agriculture, to food. And that is something I think that we need to take a note of. So here's a little bit more a bigger breakdown of the impacts of agriculture. So if we're again looking at, for example, our freshwater ecosystems, then agriculture is responsible for 70% of freshwater withdrawals. And yeah, it's just a very, very large impact that we need to consider. And then some more examples for things we can do and lessen this, for example, agricultural impact, is one thing I think is very important is to diversify our diets, no matter what we eat, how we eat. It is not to put pressure on one species specifically. So, for example, in Latvia, we have done research and found out that the most popular fish in Latvia is salmon. That people eat. And because the entire population is so focused on just one species, considering even though we have so many freshwater species, we have so many fish species in the sea, but everyone's favorite thing to eat is salmon. And if we can diversify our diets, we can take the pressure off this one specific species, no matter what it may be. And to help you with that, WWF does have a seafood guide, which is available in many different countries. So here I have the Latvian example. It gets updated every single year, but we have the same one in Estonia, in Lithuania, in Sweden, in Spain, in many countries around the world. So do look at the seafood guide, but then you can also look at the WWF planet-based diets tool. So that will also help you inform yourself about the diet choices that you make, and then through that we can reduce the agricultural impact on everything, water, climate, and so on. And if we don't want to look at those tools, we just want to make it more simple, then I do say the main things that we should look at is local and seasonal food, because of course that's going to have smaller impact, less CO2 impact, less energy to produce it, and it will be a good starting point to reduce our impact. Same thing with environmentally friendly cleaning products, because like I mentioned, wastewater does impact our water systems still. There are some applications that I have added here which help you determine which certifications are good and which are just greenwashing. Here are just a couple of examples which are relevant to Europe, for example, the EU Eco Label or the EU Green Leaf Organic certification. And when we're choosing different products, it's also good to look at these certifications, and these apps will help you determine whether the certifications are legit or if they are really just a company coming up with its own certification to greenwash and confuse consumers. And then, of course, another big tip would be to reduce your waste. And this, I'm not just talking about plastic waste, but of course that as well. But I'm talking about reducing waste in general. So food waste is a big issue. About 1/3 of the food gets thrown out that we are purchasing, that is produced. Most of that comes from us throwing it out in our homes. We can also reduce our electricity consumption. We can reduce our consumption in general. So by trying to reduce what we buy, what we throw out, we are really lessening our impact on the environment as such. And then my last call to action to you as athletes, as citizens, is to use your voice, because I think it is incredibly important for you to speak up. People are looking at you, people are listening to you, and as ambassadors of water ecosystems, so to say, like I said, I think you see a lot of the problems firsthand, and you can give this message further to people. And this is my ask, my call to you, my call to action from you, that you use your voice and try to not just do better yourselves by following these tips, but also try to inform others of why they should do this. So that was it for my presentation. Thank you for listening, for paying attention. I hope I stayed more or less within my time, and I am happy to pass it on to Morgana. I will stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Magda. And
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Magda. It was really interesting. I already started checking out those apps. Yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is Morgana. I'm from Lithuania. I am an advocacy specialist from small organization, small NGO, Foundation for Restoration of Conservation of Peatlands. And so we work to specifically restore these ecosystems. By these, I mean peatlands. And today we'll briefly tell you about who we are, the challenges that we all face, meaning all of us as humanity, but also our organization, why it is worth to protect our peatlands, and how can you contribute to that. The picture here that you can see is a picture of a peatland. A lot of people think that peatlands are some dark and muddy places, scary probably, but no, it's actually fantastic sites and fantastic places to visit. This is the Aukštumala peatland, close to our Baltic Sea, actually. Really worth visiting. So who we are. This is us, 5 people. It's a very small organization. I'm not sure if you see the, hold on, like this. So a very small organization. It's just 5 people, and I joined them recently. I'm an advocate. I've been working in NGOs for a number of years, for decades, and I'm also a former politician. So I actually joined this small organization to help them to push their work forward, to fight for the restoration of our peatlands, and in general for nature protection in Lithuania. Because unfortunately, nothing is for granted, even in Europe. Today we have the European Nature Restoration Regulation, but even that doesn't mean that we will restore what we have already destroyed. Because in the political arena, we have a number of interests, and the industrial interests, the interests of, economical interests are way stronger in all of those political battles. And so nature and nature protection is quite often still seen as, something nice to have, rather than something that we survive on. So, so here we are. This is a team of peatland scientists. These are people who specifically work on one ecosystem, on protecting one ecosystem, and this is peatlands. So what they do, or what we do, I really find it fantastic that this organization, these 5 people, they actually physically restore peatlands. So they not only they educate and advocate and do all the raising awareness and the advocacy on the political level, but they actually physically go to peatlands and implement all the restoration work. And it was so attractive when I was still a politician. This is how I saw them, and this is how I decided to join them afterwards. By restoring the peatlands, we fight the climate change. I will elaborate on this a little bit later. We protect biodiversity. We also advocate for policy change, and I see this as one of the key activities today when it comes to protecting what we still have, what remains, right? Educating and raising awareness, and also we look for research and innovation. This means that when we restore peatlands or wetlands, we always have this challenge. A lot of those lands are now used in agriculture. So people actually earn money on this specific land. They made peatlands into arable lands, and they grow things there. And so when you come and you say, right, we have to restore the peatland, it has to be a place for nature and species and all of that, the person's natural reaction is no. It's what I live on, right? It's my money comes from this land. So you have to think of restoration in 2 ways. We think about it as a protecting the nature and our Europe, in the shape as it is, right? But we also have to look for ways to use it, to kind of make a way for sustainable use of these lands if we want to, to have to actually restore peatland there. Otherwise, we will not succeed. The economic interests will remain stronger. And so here you can see in this slide what I call the peatland eradication era. So globally, there was an era for the last 100 years especially, but even before that, when we treated peatlands as something not really useful, especially economically, right? It was, we were focused on how to turn this land into something. And so over one third of world's wetlands have been destroyed now, meaning they were drained and turned into something else. And on the diagram on the right, you can see that drained peatlands, they are mainly used in agriculture, as I said, turned into arable lands, and in forestry, so to grow timber, to grow wood. And that that eradication is not over. The process is still happening everywhere in the world, and it's happening in active actions that people still drain peatlands, but also if you're not restoring the lands, it means they degrade. So the more years pass, the more difficult it is to restore the healthy peatland in that specific area, specific place. And so peatlands are also very important because these are the places where carbon is locked. So they store twice as much carbon as all of the world's forests. And that carbon is not, it exists, it's just locked in there, waiting, let's put it this way. So 600 billion tons of carbon are stored globally in peat soils. Now, this is the peatland eradication era in Europe. You can see, you probably can find your own country here. Europe is the continent where we were the most active in eradicating our peatlands and wetlands. And so if you look on the left, you can see the continents. If you look at the right, you can see countries. Let's say Germany has a lot of peatlands destroyed. Most of the country's peatlands destroyed. Lithuania is somewhere in the middle. Finland, Ukraine. So you can probably see the picture here. And this is about Lithuania. So if you take a closer look, you can see the yellow parts. The yellow parts are the drained peatlands, and those green spots are the peatlands that still remain. So historically, Lithuania was known as a inaccessible land to the enemies as well, because it had a big territories of peatlands, and it's really difficult to cross these areas. But we have eradicated 75% of those peatlands. So the landscape of Lithuania has changed a lot during the last 100 years. And Soviet era, of course, was also one of the periods of losing those peatlands. And also the peatlands that remain, so 1/4 of peatlands still exist on our territory, it remains. But the problem is that the status, the condition of those peatlands is often also poor or bad. It might be lack of water, it might be overgrown with atypical plants, and all of other reasons. So even those little green spots that you can see on the map, it doesn't mean that this is where the species and the nature finds themselves safe. Let's put it this way. And then you would ask, probably, because a lot of people say that, especially older people around me, they're like, what? Do you work for a foundation for peatland restoration? Why do we need peatlands? Why? I mean, what is it? And you're like, okay, so now I have to explain it to you. So we deal with the big gap in knowledge, or in all the generations, because we have a history of 100 years or even more of eradication. So if they have the knowledge, what they know, it's that it was something we were trying to get rid of, right? And then here you come with this idea of, we have to restore it. So I want you to remember three things probably about the peatlands, that they play a very important role in climate change, especially when it comes to floods and wildfires, but also the greenhouse gas emissions. They also have a big biodiversity, and I'll go deeper into that, but a lot of species are going extinct because the peatlands, if we destroy the peatlands, obviously they have nowhere to go, right? They have no other place to live in. And they also function as water filters. So what Magda was saying in the previous presentation, she was saying that she was telling all about eutrophication and the problems we have in the Baltic Sea, because from the fertilizers, from what we use in agriculture especially, all of those elements, all of those nitrogen and phosphorus, all of that travels to the sea through the waters, right? And peatlands are our natural filters. So peatlands naturally filter, and they can retain maybe not huge, but they retain quantities of all of those elements. The more peatlands we have on the surface of our countries, the more natural filters we have. So they help the whole ecosystem and the Baltic Sea as well. And so I really love this slide. It's about climate change, but I will explain it little by little. So on the right, you can see this jar with pickles in it. And I love this comparison of peatlands to this jar of pickles, because once you have water in this jar, the pickles are fine. So you can, they are stored. You can put them in your basement, and, they will be there for a year or 2 years, 3 years, or probably even forever. So until there's water in there, it's fine. But if you drain the water, those pickles will start to rot and mold. And that's exactly what happens with peatlands. So when the peatland is wet, it has this fantastic ability to absorb the carbon from our atmosphere. The greenhouse gas gets absorbed by peatlands. But then if you drain the water, you have a double trouble, because it means that you lose this ability of peatlands absorbing the gas emissions. But at the same time, all of the carbon that is locked in peatlands, and that's massive amounts of carbon, they get sort of released to the atmosphere. And so peatlands become a problem. Drained peatlands, they actually accelerate the climate change because of that, of the greenhouse gas emissions. And so if we go back to that slide here, you can see that agriculture and forestry, these two sectors, are the sectors that use big territories of drained peatlands. And all of these fields, all of these territories, they emit a lot of carbon to the atmosphere every day when they are used for agriculture and forestry. So what we need to do is we need to bring back the water. And if we bring back the water, we restore the peatlands, and so the biodiversity can recreate, but also we stop this process of CO2 emissions. And you can see this picture. It's actually an AI picture. It's not a real one, but it looks like a good representation. We used to have a lot of peatlands within the forests, and I really love this fact, because now we don't see it in many territories in Lithuania, as I said, because it's been drained, and we use it to grow more trees for the wood industry, for the timber, right? So we use these lands now for growing forests, but it used to be little spots, little oases within the forests, right? And it makes sense because it's fresh water to the wild stock, to the animals. It's the whole biodiversity is different, right? Within the forest. And if you think about wildfires, it's like a genius way of nature protecting itself. So you have all those little spots within the forest that work as barriers and do not allow wildfires to spread. And so, we've been losing that for years and years now, and none of that is probably not so much left anymore. And also, there's one more trouble, that if you drain the peatland, it becomes like a timber box. So you need just one spark of fire, and it just it will set it ablaze. So on this picture on the left, you can see the drained peat soil caught by fires. And this is a quite common phenomenon. We have it in Lithuania, we have it in a lot of other countries. These fires are very difficult to stop. So yeah, biodiversity is one more reason why we really need to restore our peatlands, because 1/3 of endangered plants, and this is Lithuanian statistics, 1/3 of endangered plants are found in wetlands. And obviously, if you destroy the wetlands, the plants become endangered. And obviously, that happens. The same happens to the birds and reptiles and insects. A big number of European birds are endangered because of the loss of the wetlands. And now again, I will go quickly. If you look at this eradication, if you look at the list of countries and you imagine each of this country destroying this part of their peatlands and wetlands, and only that little blue part on the right is left. So you can imagine, how many species become endangered. And this is this little bird here. It's called, let me find an English name. It's aquatic warble. So it's like a smallest songbird that we have in Europe, the rarest bird that we have, and it only lives in 4 countries in Europe, including Lithuania, Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. And it lives on peatlands. So this is what we do. We implement all of the work related to restoring peatlands in Lithuania. On the left side, you can see how a drained peatland looks like, and on the right side, this is the peatland when we implement the restoration and the water comes back to the territory. And little by little, this ecosystem can recreate itself. And yeah, and on October the 4th, we agreed with the Lithuanian Rowing Federation to have this common action. This is a picture from a previous year, but every year our foundation, together with a lot of volunteers from Lithuania, we go and we remove the biomass from peatland areas in Lithuania to help the peatland to sort of maintain its good status, its good shape, and to provide the home for all of the species. So it will be really great to have Lithuanian Rowing Federation joining us, and this is one of the ways how you can join your country's initiatives, because in most countries, organizations that work to restore peatlands are really small organizations. If you remember the picture of us, it's 4 people plus me, so it's 5 people, 4 specialists and me as an advocate, helping them to raise awareness. And so 4 people restoring vast territories of peatlands in Lithuania is really, really small. But we rely a lot on volunteers and the help from different organizations. And I'm really proud and happy that Lithuanian Rowing Federation will join us. And we can do this together. I also want to emphasize that probably raising awareness around you is the most important, because as I said, when it comes to wetlands and peatlands, after a century of eradication, we have no knowledge in the general public why these ecosystems are valuable, because we were all functioning in this mode of, eradicating, transforming, making use of those lands. Yeah. So thank you very much, and I will be ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Morgana. I think it's been very insightful, and thank you for the commitment. Thank you for presenting, and thank you for joining the Lithuanian Rowing Federation and the organizing committee, the Trakai organizing committee of the World Rowing Under 19 Championships, in a very exciting project that will happen later in the year in October, that will not only create awareness with the rowing community, but also make a positive change and have a positive impact on nature. I would now take the opportunity to open the floor for questions that our community and participants may have to you both. I already see that there is some comments on the chat thanking you for the presentations. I can already respond to say that the recording will be available for other people also to check it. And I think that we have actually a question from Pat Lambert, who is also a World Rowing Sustainability Advisor. So perhaps, Pat, you want to make the question directly. I would ask that Mike can help us with unmuting you. Here you are.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you for these presentations, really insightful, and it's very down to earth. It's things that we can understand even as if we are not specialists in the field. We heard a very interesting call for action from WWF for the athletes. We see that you also have an action on the 4th of October with the Lithuanian Rowing Federation. But I wanted to ask you, is there something we can do, or our athletes and member federations can do also outside Lithuania? And it's especially for the second speaker that I had this question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very good question. I love your motivation. I think what you can do is you can look for organizations working in your countries, involved in nature protection, but especially if you're interested in peatlands restoration, because everywhere, at least in Europe, it's a big issue, and those little organizations, they are emerging, or sometimes it's a bigger organization that includes tasks to restore peatlands. As an advocate and a former politician, I see that they are weak in their visibility. Most of these organizations, they really need a lot of help from different fields: fashion industry, sports, athletes, artists. I mean, we need people to get involved to really raise visibility and awareness, because as a former politician, I honestly will tell you, politicians look for political points. If they see that the broader public is interested into something and raising questions and probably there's some interest circulating around. We can hear about forest protection, right? Forest protection, at least in Lithuania, these issues somehow circulate in the public, right? But when it comes to peatland restoration, nobody knows what that's about. And politicians, if they see that this will not gain political points, they don't get involved, or they don't take the lead. And so somehow in Europe, we say, okay, so we have this European Green Course, and we sort of feel, maybe more secure that Europe is committed to restoring restoring nature. But as a politician, I also know that this might change. There are a lot of really powerful players on this field, like agriculture, the farmers, there are a lot of interest, the industry, and they are very, very powerful. So when the farmers come with tractors and there's you and your four friends standing there talking about species that go extinct, you realize how weak you are on this game, right? So what you can do as athletes, I think you can get involved with these organizations to help them to get more visibility. And I think that would be amazing if that would happen around Europe. And from different fields, not only athletes, but also, as I say, fashion industry, artists, singers, whoever. This really helps.
Thank you very much, Morgana. We have another question from Elena Pinto, and maybe so. Basically, Elena is asking about incentives, perhaps even funds available to motivate sports organizations, in particular those disciplines depending on natural settings, for their sports activities, to join forces with environmental organizations for future protection and restoration. I don't know if Magda or Morgana want to come in. My first thought on it is, well, the incentive is, as you have mentioned, and you've particularly mentioned, peatlands and wetlands has defenses from climate change, right? And climate change affects us all. So I think the biggest incentive is protecting our planet. And having, for example, for sports who use water, such as rowing, have water in good conditions to be able to do the sport. But I would say mostly this is connected to our own survival, right? So it's a bit more than the other type of incentive, but perhaps as experts in the field, you might know of some funding streams that can be used for applications where different organizations from sport and conservation can unite. Go ahead, Magda.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you said, that of course the environment being incredibly important for these athletes. I mean, we saw what happened with the Paris Olympics, where the river was too polluted for the athletes to use it until they actually cleaned it up. So of course that is a major incentive for the athletes to get involved. But of course we're also talking about that these sports organizations may not always have the funding to do these activities. So then, for example, in Latvia, we have similar initiatives like Morgana talked about that they do in Lithuania. Due to time constraints today, I did not include everything that we do, but of course, we work, for example, in protected areas, and we involve people to help us maintain and restore them. Because I think very often we imagine that if an area is protected, it's fine. Leave it alone, it's good. But because we have so few territories around the world which are not impacted by humans, these protected areas, even in Europe, they have to be regularly maintained by people. So we have to battle invasive species. We are currently doing quite a lot of river restoration events. And we organize these events for the public, mainly as an educational tool, because it's a great way to bring people to the sites, to show them what we're doing, to tell them why we're doing it. And the impact may be sort of like a drop in the ocean, but if we can spread this and we spread the knowledge through these participants, then of course the impact is bigger. And our organization, for example, does a lot of open events like this where anyone can attend. So a sports organization can come to us and say that we want to give our hands, give our time, and help you restore some protected areas. We do that. And like Morgana said, do look at organizations in your own countries. WWF is in a lot of countries. Many offices do activities like this, but there's also many smaller organizations which do this locally, like Morgana's organization.
Thank you so much, Magda. I believe we are 10 minutes over time. So I would really like to thank you. I think it's been really insightful, and I'm very hopeful that our community will continue to engage with obviously WWF, but also other organizations like Morgana's organization, Peatlands in Lithuania. Very proud that the Lithuanian community is already engaging for October, and also very proud of the Trakai Organizing Committee engagement with the Biodiversity Compass, which will help us monitor the biodiversity levels in Trakai. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who has attended. Thank you to everyone who has prompted their questions. It's very important for us to have everyone on board, to multiply the impact. So let's say lots of drops will make the ocean, and will make obviously healthier waters, and will help protect our sport, and will help protect our planet. So thank you very much to the two speakers. Thank you also to Mike and Pat, and Mike in particular for organizing the webinar, and hope to see you in a next webinar sooner than later. So thank you so much, and have a good rest of the week, everyone.